Michael, that was Here Comes the Judge, but here goes the judge, yeah. Hey, this is Jim Worthen, the show's Worthen One-on-One. We're here on Channel 17 Cox Cable, broadcasts at 1 o'clock on Monday, 5 o'clock on Wednesday, and 7 o'clock on Friday. But as my sainted brother who loved jazz used to say, that's only the first verse. We're on TVSB's website, search Worthen One-on-One, and you can see us anywhere in the world. Or just go to our Vimeo site, Vimeo, search Worthen One-on-One, and you'll see us forever. Some people in my family complain about that they're going to have to explain to me, their grandchildren. And it's my pleasure always to have my various guests, but this is kind of a special one. I believe it's his 7th show, and we started out with him explaining the Constitution article by article, then the Bill of Rights section by section. So real constitutional scholar and professor at the Law School of Constitutional Law. I would call him a dear friend, but he might object, and then I would have trouble appearing before him in court. Brian Hill. Judge Hill, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here.
You didn't argue with me about being my friend, I noticed.
No, I didn't. You're my friend. I treasure the friendship. I love coming back here, love talking about the law and other subjects. So it's great to be here.
Brian, may I call you Brian?
You can call me Brian.
Your honor.
I don't have my robe on. You can call me Brian.
We start every show with where were you born?
So I was born in Vermont, and my dad was a school teacher in a small town, Greensboro, Vermont. And then when I was about 2, he moved to what he thought was a better teaching job in Connecticut. We spent about 2 or 3 years there. And then when I was age 5, so that was a long time ago, in the late 50s, we moved to Santa Maria.
Where? Santa Maria, California.
Santa Maria, California, because my dad
10,000 people then.
That's exactly right. There were 10,000 people then. My dad had a brother who was at Vandenberg. He was in the military. Oh. So that's how we became aware of Santa Maria. My dad got a job at Santa Maria High School. And we stayed there in Santa Maria until 1970. Then in 1970, my parents thought they wanted to go back to their roots. So my dad started to apply for teaching positions throughout New England. And he obtained one in northern Vermont. So we went back to Vermont. I was there for 2 years, my last 2 years of high school.
Oh, I was going to say, so your elementary school was in Santa Maria.
It was in Santa Maria, but my dad kept a little place near a lake in northern Vermont. So every summer, we would drive between my ages of 5 and 15 or 16. We would drive back to Vermont, and we would spend the summer in Vermont. And so we trekked across the country like 6 or 7 times. And so you imagine this, we had 4 kids.
Not air conditioning.
No air conditioning. Oftentimes my grandmother would come with us. We had a dog and a cat, and mom and dad. So we had 7 people and a couple pets. Ooh. And we drove across the country. And I can remember being like this. I have 3 sisters, being like this almost the entire time, because there was no room to move around. And my dad took great pride in being able to stay awake to drive halfway or 3/4 of the way across the country before we'd stop. So we'd go literally 2 or 3 full days before we would stop at a hotel. And so we were always in a station wagon, and all of us kids, the 4 kids, would get in the back of the station wagon and sleep during the nights when my dad would drive. And
every once in a while, that boy would stick his head up and say, "Are we there yet?"
Oh, I mean, you learn patience when you experience that as a young kid. And even to this day, my wife likes to drive. So when we take trips, she drives. My wife, Jeannie Hill, and and I'll read, and I have no problem reading in a moving car or doing, looking at the iPad. And there's a lot of people who can't do that, and for me it's easy. But anyway, so after 2 years in Vermont, we came back to California. My mom couldn't take the winters. The second year we were in Vermont, we had I think the largest snowfall in Vermont history up to that point.
Whoa.
So we were just buried with snow. And so she really pushed my dad to go back to California. She was more comfortable with the California lifestyle at that point. And so we came back to California. I was about ready to start college at the University of Vermont. But I came back with them and started and went to Hancock for 2 years. And
so
then
city colleges, community colleges are a blessing even more today to people because they don't get 2 years of loans or
they're great.
Yeah.
It's like any school, and you've heard this before, and it's absolutely true. The quality of education you get is really dependent on you as the student. So you can go to state school or you can go to Harvard. You can go to Harvard and get a lousy education because you're just not committed to learning and to studying, and you don't have the intellectual curiosity. But you can go to Hancock and Cal Poly, UCSB, or a state school. I went to UCSB. And if you have that kind of curiosity, then you can get a great education. So
I went to Oakland City College with Eldridge Cleaver and the Black Panthers before they were Black Panthers, and the biggest class I ever had in there or at Santa Barbara City College later was 100, 200 people, and the same course was being taught at Berkeley, where I'd wanted to go. 3,000 people in the arena, so it's not only the same education, it's more helpful too.
Well, I think I think people oftentimes make the mistake of looking at the school an individual goes to and making certain judgments about intellectual capability and work ethic and a whole variety of things that relate to the likelihood of success in a chosen field. And that's just wrong, as we know from experience. You can go to junior college and then a state school and be tremendously successful and be very intellectual and have great judgment and insights. Our greatest president didn't go to a college at all, barely went to elementary school, was self-taught, Abraham Lincoln. So, yeah. And he was dealing with a sort of the intellectual elites of the time from the East Coast Harvard Ivy League schools, and he did quite well. And
common sense, as Ronald Reagan would say. One of our great patriots in the Reagan era never passed the bar. He didn't take it. Justice William Clark, yeah. Bill Clark Jr., who was a Supreme Court justice in the state Supreme Court and went on to be Undersecretary of State, National Security Advisor, and just and a great guy, just really a great person.
Well, I think one of the absolutely greatest U.S. Supreme Court justices is Justice Jackson. And he was the last justice not to go to law school. Mm-hmm. And he was the prosecutor in the Nuremberg trials, but he authored many, many famous decisions. And he dissented from some of the most infamous decisions where he was in the right. History proved that he was correct.
Or discuss of Ivy League that you were mentioning, where that's the credential that everybody wants. There's going to be a Supreme Court case on their obvious redlining and prejudice against Oriental students at Harvard. That'll be up. Will that be up this?
I think that they've granted hearing certiorari in that case, and so I don't think that's going to be argued in the spring. I think it'll be argued next fall. Is more likely.
Judged in the summer of 24.
I mean, it's a very interesting issue because with sort of a wink and a nod, we've engaged in affirmative action for a long time. We haven't said that they're racial quotas, but when you look at the numbers, they're racial quotas. Schools really work hard to get a certain percentage of various minorities into the school. And you know, for a long time, the court has said that's constitutional, but they may revisit. I mean, they're obviously going to revisit that, and because it's, you know, we want to live in a country in which people are judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, and we want to see people of all races succeed.
Well, the problem with any kind of affirmative action, not merit only, is what you do to the person who you give a leg up who isn't ready, whether they be a minority or poor white people who they want to get into different institutions, and they should be going to City College. That's where they should be going, getting ready so many minority students never get any further than their first year or so and wash out, and they don't get the education or the leg up.
I think I mean, you make a great point. I think it's important for those who are studying studying whether affirmative action works to look at the statistics and not to be closed-minded about looking at them. So when you look at people who are being admitted to schools under affirmative action programs, what are the outcomes? Yeah. We ought to look at the outcomes to see if this is really being successful, yeah, or if we're doing harm to these individuals.
We should use...
and people don't, it's not racist to say, and it's not unreasonable to say, we simply want to judge and evaluate the success of these programs. If they're successful, then it makes all the sense in the world to keep them going. If they're not successful, then why would you continue to engage in something that most people are opposed to, which is preferences on the basis of race?
I would love to see, and I know why the leftists and education establishment haven't done this, a study of 10,000 students by number, don't know what their race is, don't even know what their sex is, and find the breakdown of success, and then look at the race and sex and everything. One of the biggest tragedies in education today is men are dropping out. Men aren't seeing any reason to go into the feminist educational system. So I think we're down to 45% or less men in upper education. It's become strict, and the more that happens, the more they don't want to go where they feel they're not being treated equally to all the girls. Let's go back to you at Hancock. At some point you're going to tell me when you married the most beautiful woman, one of the most beautiful women in town, and way above and she's brighter than you too. I can say that because I say it to their face. Also our friend Tim Tremblay has the same blessing, way above his pay grade. He married a cheerleader. He was a dumb jock. Anyway, after Hancock, what did you do?
So after Hancock, I spent a year at the University of Hawaii Hilo, which is a NAIA school.
Where?
Playing in Hawaii Hilo.
Jeez.
I know. So I spent a year there playing basketball. I wasn't very good. It's a school the level of Westmont. And I think at that point, I was forced to recognize that I was not going to have a career in basketball. And so really at that point, and I was just 20, I sort of awakened in terms of having a interest in the world of ideas, becoming a little bit more intellectual, a little bit more interested in the world around us and social policy and political theory and things of that sort. And so I was a history major, so I finished up after 1 year at Hancock, 1 year at Hawaii Hilo, and then transferred to UCSB and finished up at UCSB. And had a good grade point average, and then ended up going to law school.
What year did you graduate from UCSB?
1977.
Yeah, so you were after the riots. You
I was
didn't
after
cause
the
them.
riots.
I was there. I was one of the reasons for the riots. I was.
Are you going to confess here?
Yeah, I was.
You know, this could be on national TV. You know.
I had been in Sacramento with Bob Lagomarsino and the governor, so I ended up. In my last year, they started rioting, and I ended up kind of as the in man for the governor, working with the sheriff's department, highway patrol, and I met many a night out in the fire station on Stark Road where our headquarters was, and yeah, you missed all the fun. It was.
Well, I had plenty of fun. Remember, I was living in Isla Vista in the '70s. So,
yeah.
Whether you were there in the early '70s or the '60s or the '80s, '90s, today,
yeah, but
it's a fun place to live if you're a student at UCSB, which is a great school.
But you didn't go through 400 days of civil disobedience and lockdowns and. The most terrifying people I've ever met, the LA Sheriff's Squad of Special Enforcement. You had to have at least a 2-year college degree. You had to be over 220 pounds and over 6 foot tall to get on the. I see these guys and I'm thinking, But the funny thing is, I was with them up on the top floor, Cheadle's office. The 2 guys came in for coordination with Dave Manier, our DA, and Sheriff Webster, and they said, "This is heaven. Why are these people rioting?" Looking out over the campus, the lagoon, the ocean, and they just couldn't understand the students. So you graduated UCSB. Had you met your love of life yet?
Well, I was married before I met my present wife. So I got a divorce in 2001. I have 2 kids from that marriage. Oh. And then I met my wife in 2003, and she was going through a divorce at the time. She had lived in Germany for 2 years, and then she had moved. She was originally from Santa Barbara. She came back to Santa Barbara. So I met her in 2003, 2004, and then we were married. We started. We were a partnership really in 2005, and we got married in 2009. So we've been together about 17 years.
So you were a judge when they.
So I was a judge.
Oh.
So I was a judge.
A gold digger. No, judges don't make that much money.
No, she didn't marry me for my money. That much is for sure. But I mean, we're soulmates. We have a great relationship, and I couldn't be happier. And I think she feels the same way. So we're very, very pleased.
You have 2 children from your previous marriage. Did she?
And she had 2, one of which I raised, basically, and the other was a little bit older. So, but I'm very involved in both their lives. Yeah. So. And their natural father, my wife's kid's natural father, her ex-husband, not so involved. So I've been able to step into the breach a little bit and be kind of a father figure, I think, especially to one of them. And that's been fantastic. And we're really fortunate. I think anytime you do the blended family, there's going to be some ups and downs, but all 4 kids are adults. They're all successful. They've done extremely well. And my wife and I worked really, really hard to make that happen. And it does take a lot of effort.
From the bench, you probably see the most obvious sociological fact the last 30 years, and that is if there isn't a strong male figure, the odds of criminality, drug use, just falling off the table as far as society is concerned.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote a piece in the early '60s for which he was a hardcore Democrat, and he was kind of ostracized from the Democratic Party because he said, you know, with some of the social welfare programs that have been instituted, what we've done is to incentivize essentially the breakdown of the family, and we've seen that happen. So there was a point in time up till maybe 1962 or 63 where more white kids were born out of wedlock than black kids, and that's no longer the case.
Right.
And so we've done as a country, and we've done a great disservice throughout our history to Black America, but more recently, we've done a great disservice by having social policies that have resulted in far too many boys growing up in homes where there's nobody to show them how to be a man. That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy that really white America did to Black America. I mean, we did those policies, and you know we're not gonna reverse all those social welfare policies. But boy, there's some things we can do that can decrease the likelihood that, you know, that black kids will be killing black kids as they do at the rate that they do in the inner cities. I mean, it's just a tragedy, and there's things we can do, and we have to be open to the empirical evidence that suggests that certain things work and certain things don't, and we tend not to be. We tend to be closed-minded for whatever reason.
Well, the young men without church and family in all communities, but particularly lately in the black community, end up killing each other. And most recently, the little known and FBI has only sent out one report nationwide that I saw that all the violence against Chinese isn't because of Wuhan or Nike. It's a racial hatred by the young black men for the Oriental. 85% of the killings of Orientals are by young black men. That's the only group they kill as much as they kill their own, and it's just a tragedy that happens without value, without a anchor in your life. And
I was not aware of that.
They don't like to publicize it because
I frankly hadn't heard that before. But I know that there's a fair amount of anti-Asian sentiment out there. You know, because of for a variety of reasons, and some of it with the really old Americans, right? And then their offspring was directed at Japanese Americans, and then some of it's directed at Chinese Americans in China, and some of it's, you know, Southeast Asia, so.
Or if you.
Or South Asian, I guess.
One of the tragedies is if you happen to be a Hispanic who looks a little Oriental, then you're subject to a hate crime too. So let's go back to your career. You get out of UCSB. You then did some higher education, of course.
UCSB. I mean, I won't give you. Everybody has a lengthy history, but basically, I had no lawyers in my family. I had no idea I wanted to go to law school. That wasn't really on my radar, and I took a year off. And among other things, I was in the history program at UCSB for a master's, and then perhaps a PhD, because I thought, well, maybe that's a direction. I didn't find that particularly satisfying. Maybe I'm just too social for that kind of work, but And then I applied to law school. And when I applied to law school, I mean, it's embarrassing to say now, but I didn't know Hastings was a law school. I mean, I did no preparation before I just fired off some applications to, schools based really on geographically where they were located. So I thought, well, Denver would be a fun place to live. It's near the Rocky Mountains. I like Boston. I'd been in the East Coast.
You never were really a serious person, were you?
and then here's an interesting fact. So I was dating a girl from when I was at this time, 22, 23, thinking about what I was going to do. And she was from San Francisco, Marin County. And her dad...
Hastings.
Well, Hastings, yeah, I didn't know Hastings was a law school, but her dad was a business person who knew the present governor's father, William Newsom, who was a Court of Appeal justice. And I was about ready to enroll at the University of Denver. And she and he, her father, persuaded me to apply late to University of San Francisco.
Whoa.
And I think I met William Newsom at a lunch, and he was praising University of San Francisco. I still didn't know Hastings was a law school. And so I enrolled at USF Law School. And it's embarrassing because
Was that Hastings or was that Bolt Hall?
No, it was the University of San Francisco as a law school. So that's where I went, and I was encouraged to do that by William Newsom. So
now you have your
So I'm in law school. I didn't know a tort from a contract. I mean, I went in having never met a lawyer, having never stepped foot in a courtroom, just, kind of searching for a goal and an objective and some, meaning, I guess. And so I know it's silly,
but you just keep stumbling through life.
Oh gosh, please, now you've said that and everybody's going to think, my gosh, this guy, how did he become a judge? But I mean, the one thing that I had was a work ethic. So I worked very hard, did well in law school, and had some great internships. Worked for a lot of judges, worked for the California Supreme Court. Did a research, after law school, I was a research attorney for 3 years. And then I spent a year on a Rotary Scholarship at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, which was great, and spent 16 months in Europe. Spent 9 months in the program, but I spent a month in France, month in Italy, month in Germany, saw a lot. Went behind the Iron Curtain. I mean, more stories that you don't have time for, but I was in Poland and was arrested for demonstrating illegally with solidarity and inciting a riot, trumped up charges. And so, some great experiences. I mean, one of the experiences, I think if you live in Europe for an extended period of time with your eyes open and you really understand the political culture and the culture generally, I think you have a new appreciation for America.
Because how great we are. Yes.
How great we are. And because we have, generally speaking, more freedom than those who are in Europe. And we
did till 2 years ago.
Well, I think we do. I mean, there's just no question that we do. And I think if you have some of the experiences like I had, arrested by the government, no notice of the charges, no reasons given. The only reason I was arrested, I was an American, I was a scapegoat. They were gonna explain riot, solidarity demonstrations.
Did Lech Walesa put up your bail?
He did not put up my bail. He did not put up my bail, but that's the town I was arrested in. I was arrested in Krakow. Yeah. And it was sort of the hotbed of the solidarity movement, protected in large part by the cardinal at the time, but later Pope John Paul II. Yeah. because he was a cardinal from Krakow. So anyway.
So what brought you to Santa Maria again?
So I came back and applied to different legal jobs. Was hired by the Santa Barbara County DA's office. They didn't have an opening in Santa Barbara, which is where I wanted to be. But I went to Santa Maria, where I was quite comfortable, and because I'd grown up there, knew a lot of people there, and started out in the DA's office there. But there was an opening in Santa Barbara a couple of years later, so I came down to Santa Barbara. And I was in the DA's office from 1985, really 1986, to 2002. I won the election for judge.
Now, was that an open seat?
Or it was an open seat.
So I know you had many opponents, which we crushed.
We crushed them. We won. There were 4 opponents, two of the 3 opponents of mine ended up becoming judges, Judge Stern and Judge Dandona. So, I mean, that's, if you want to become a judge, I think you can find a way if you're persistent and you conduct yourself with integrity and honesty as a lawyer. I think it's a very achievable goal.
That's where you and I met in your campaign. I won't tell.
I didn't have a lot of money, so I spent a lot of time shaking hands and kissing babies. I campaigned all over the county, and I had some natural advantages because I'd been a DA in Santa Barbara from like 1988 or 89 to 2002. So I knew a lot of people in Santa Barbara, and I was from Santa Maria.
That was.
And it's a countywide election.
Earlier phases of this show, you were on, I think, 3 times, and. Shall I tell election night?
I don't remember election night. Maybe if you
I have
tell
witnesses.
It'll refresh my recollection.
Down in the funk zone, and you were having your election night turning into a victory party, and I got down there about 9:30. Came in, and a slightly inebriated new judge said, "Where do they come over here? Hey, folks, this is the guy who got me elected."
Well, I don't. I'm
you
sure
don't remember it.
I don't remember that, but that sounds like it probably would have happened. I was exhausted at the end of that campaign.
Oh.
I mean, I first of all, I borrowed a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of resources. I didn't have really any family money, so I borrowed a lot of money, and I worked very hard. I went from being about 200 pounds at the time to 240 pounds because I was on the rubber chicken circuit.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I never missed an opportunity to go to a Rotary Club, a Lions Club, any kind of place where people were gathering, I was there, all over the county. So,
horrible.
I mean, I was very busy, and so I gained 40 pounds. So I was pretty exhausted at the end of all that.
Bob Lugger-Mercino and I went on as his campaign manager. I spent a lot of time with him and working together, and then going to a payphone. And one morning we stopped at a great little breakfast place in Fillmore, and we ordered steak and eggs. And I started laughing and laughing. He said, "Why?" I said, "Do you realize this is the 17th or 18th straight meal with steak in it we've had?" Because it's either chicken or steak.
You don't have the energy or the inclination to be very discriminating when it comes to food. When you're that busy, it's just like get the food in, and keep going.
Also, you don't want to insult the people who are providing it, and with all the Santa Maria barbecues and Santa Maria.
I mean, the focus is just not on your waistline. You got a different focus, and that's the way I try to understand it. That I just fine, I should be concerned exactly what I eat, but you know what I'm really concerned about? I want to be here at this next meeting at the time they expect me to be there, and then, you know, I have to gracefully exit after I speak.
How much weight did you gain?
40 pounds.
We each gained 20, so that's your 40.
Yeah, so
let's go to the law before we have more fun. You've been on the bench 20 years. One case that keeps getting thrown in my face when I tell people that I really respect you and you're a friend is a Chinese guy with a dog. And correct me if I don't tell it correctly, he was recognized visibly torturing and hurting his dog. And when he came to sentencing, people felt you should have put him in jail for 10 years. Tell us how that case worked out.
Well, so the case was originally filed as a misdemeanor domestic violence case with a misdemeanor charge of animal abuse. That's how it was filed.
Filing means the DA's office,
DA
not the judge.
The DA filed it. It was a misdemeanor animal cruelty charge and a misdemeanor DV charge. It's been now some time, but as I recall, when the cops responded to the 911 call, I think from his girlfriend in their apartment, he was a student, she, I believe, was a student, both from China. It was that my boyfriend has hit me or threatened me, or it was kind of a classic.
15 years ago, yeah.
It was a domestic violence call.
10 years.
And so they talked to her, they talked to him. She didn't have any visible injuries, and then they noticed that the dog was severely injured. So they asked about the dog, and he had tortured the dog. And I think animal control was called, and the dog was picked up, and the reports were written, and they went to the DA's office, which then did the filing. And the dog had been tortured, and was tortured so badly. I mean, it was a pretty heinous crime. There's no question about it. But the dog was tortured so badly that they had to put it down, which is very sad. And then the case received some publicity, as you know, and
but it came to you as a misdemeanor.
As my recollection is, it came as a misdemeanor, and then as it gained publicity and people became outraged at the crime that was committed against the dog, charges were increased, and so I think by the time that the case was ready for resolution, there were like 6 or 7 felonies. I mean, literally. Well, maybe it was 4 or 5. It was a large number of felonies, including felony domestic violence, felony dog abuse, animal abuse, and he was good for the felony animal abuse. So there's no question about it. So, and he was prepared to plead to everything. He said, I did all these things. I'm going to plead guilty. And he pled guilty. And so what we do when somebody pleads guilty like that, especially to all the charges, we send it to the probation department to do a report, to make a recommendation of whether this person should be placed on probation or not, whether this person is redeemable or not. So the probation department recommended probation. He had no criminal history. He was a student. He was from China. He was extremely remorseful. He had come from a place in China where both state authorities, police, and citizens routinely kill dogs, like we may kill gophers. And that's not to say he should be held to the standard that is in place in China. He was prepared to accept responsibility for all the crimes. But when we get to the point of sentencing, we attempt to determine whether someone is evil, what their character is, what their mindset is, whether they're an evil person, and we judge that the degree to which they're really culpable for their actions. Not that they escape responsibility, but we want to know, is this someone who's really evil?
And probation recommended probation.
Probation recommended probation, but you look at him and you say, is this someone who's just inherently evil? Well, he grew up in a culture that routinely not only killed dogs, but ate them, and it's just a different culture. It's hard for us to appreciate. We take our relationships with our pets very differently. But he was not an evil person. He was not someone who was going to pose a threat to the community.
So what did you do that pissed people off?
Well, I think, first of all, when you go, I think people have close relationships with their pets here, closer than in other cultures. Certainly dogs are treated differently here than they are in China, where he came from. And so people wanted the maximum sentence. They wanted a state prison for the maximum amount of time.
10 years, I think.
Yeah, it was a large number. And one of the things you do as judges is you figure out who really is a public safety risk, who is really evil, who is redeemable, who is truly remorseful, what their criminal history is like. You weigh all of those things. He was going to be deported in any event. So we put him in custody, sat in the county jail for a year, did a full year, and then he was deported. And so the question really was...
So did you send him to jail for a year, or was he in custody the whole time?
No, we took him into custody. Okay. I mean, that was part of the sentence, that he was going to have to do an extended period of time in custody.
And then he was deported.
And I remember we were going through... I manage a case that oversees the jail overcrowding. It's because of COVID, it's not so overcrowded now. But there was a period in time where it was really overcrowded, and
150%.
Created some conditions that local civil rights lawyers were concerned about, and they were pushing to have people furloughed and released. And I can remember sheriff's personnel suggesting to me that there were people like this particular defendant who really didn't pose a risk of harm to anybody else if he was furloughed, but he wasn't. I mean, there was just a lot of community outrage about the crime. Right. And I can understand it. Look, when you're a judge, you're not going to make everybody happy, and there are going to be tough calls. Yeah, they're going to be tough calls.
You don't execute every murderer like you should. I get really upset. Hey, I'll
tick off there's plenty of DAs who would be happy to give testimonials about how they are sometimes disturbed by my rulings, and there are plenty of defense attorneys the same. So you're just not going to please everyone.
No. Let's talk about the greater situation. Since we've been setting up even this very show, Justice William Breyer announced, somebody leaked that he was going to resign at the end of this term, which will be in July, June or July. What's the procedure now, constitutionally?
Well, the president nominates. The Senate has to confirm.
Is that in the Constitution?
It is in the Constitution.
Okay.
So the president nominates, the Senate confirms. It's a majority vote in the Senate. And, no
other guidelines to either the president or the...
There are probably rules that have been established by the Senate for how the confirmation process will proceed.
Constitutionally, no
but
other.
Constitutionally, it's the nomination by the president, and then nomination by the president, confirmation by the Senate, and so I think President Biden said today that he was going to be deliberate in picking a candidate. So I think he suggested or intimated it would be like 30 days, approximately a month. He wanted to thoroughly vet the candidates. He's announced it's going to be a black woman, and
a black jurist.
A black jurist, but that's still, there's a fair number of candidates. So he's going to take some time, and then the Senate will do their confirmation hearings. I mean, they all appear to have tremendous qualifications on paper. So, what that vetting will involve is looking at whether there's anything that could be problematic to particular groups in the society. So,
but the benefit to this, unlike some judicial appointments in the past, is that these will all have a case history. They've written, they've made decisions. Now, some of them he probably appointed earlier in his term even, but they've started to make rulings, and so
they'll have some history. They'll have a track record, yeah.
Yeah, and so the Senate, that's why they end up going almost to every major senator's office and sitting down with them. Then there's hearings, and they won't be like Bork or Kavanaugh. They will be based upon their case history. A lot of my friends want us to bork them, no matter who they are, and that's not the history of the Republican Party regarding judicial appointments. The president has that right, and they'd like it be given to Republican presidents too.
I don't think you're going to see. I mean, there are. If you listen to CNN or you listen to liberal commentators, they're predicting it's going to be an all-out war. I don't see it. I don't think that's going to happen. It's a historic nomination of a black female jurist. She's replacing somebody who's a liberal icon, so it's not going to change the balance. But it is historic, and I think that respect for the office of the presidency and his prerogatives is something that a lot of senators have that kind of respect, and I think she's going to sail through. The same sort of thing people predicted. I mean, Scalia was he's very conservative, originalist, first Italian American to be appointed to the bench, very engaging, great personality, and he went through 98-0.
Yeah.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a historic lawyer, second on the bench. She sailed through, I think, 98-0. So it's not going to be 98-0, but it's going to be, I think it's going to be a big number.
That's kind of been the history of judicial appointments till Bork, till the ultra liberals began to think, oh, we'll just tear up that conservative. And that's, I think, tragic for the system. Now, I want to deny something. I'm going to pull a Gutfeld, folks. I want to deny something. Bill Clinton appointed Breyer.
Yes.
And I want to deny that he's resigning early out of fear for his life because of the Clintons.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. You'll have to explain.
Oh, a lot of people died that are associated with the Clintons.
Well. I mean, I think he understands that his legacy will be carried on by his successor,
right.
and that the timing is right for him to retire. And if he cares about his particular judicial philosophy, which he does, it's the time to retire. And I think it's smart. I mean, he's 83. He's had a long career. You definitely begin to lose some energy. Everybody's different. I mean, I grant you that, but you're just not the same person at 80 as you were at 60. I mean, there's no question. Sorry, believe me, I'm not 60 either, so I can say that too. So you begin to decline in terms of energy levels, and so I think it was wise. I mean, I agree with all the liberals who were critical of Ginsburg. She should have retired earlier to give the appointment to Obama if she cared about her particular brand of judicial philosophy, which she does care about. You want to have that carry on. then you retire, because she was in her 80s as well.
So this loss of energy explains why before I do a show I have 3 cups of coffee and smoke a cigar.
Well, that may be part of it. That's
No.
a clue that maybe
It's intentional. I want to be alert. I think the process will be more congenial, and I think the rabid right-wingers are going to be, and I am more right-wing than any of them, they're going to ignore the Constitution and history at their own stupidity.
I don't know. I mean, I would hope that we could sort of turn the page on just attack of people who are, after all, human beings, and nobody's perfect. And bringing up stuff from when people were in high school,
making things up.
Well, I mean, there was very little evidence that it had happened, but it was like at some point, you have to appreciate that people are going to make mistakes, And I'm not talking about Kavanaugh. I don't want to get into that. People have strong feelings about he did it, he didn't do it. But just generally speaking, we can't expect perfection out of our Supreme Court nominees or people who serve us in government. And we're going to have a candidate that you could probably, nominated by Biden, you could probably chip away at. But I hope that Republicans take the high road, and if she's qualified, and undoubtedly she will be, they confirm her and just move on. And I hope that Democrats would do the same, and not just absolutely oppose everybody appointed by a Republican because you don't like their judicial philosophy, because people have different judicial philosophies.
Except the Republicans, it's the Constitution.
So you have strong feelings about it. They have strong feelings about their approach. They're different, but they're both legitimate. You cannot argue that one is completely illegitimate. You can favor one over the other. That's fair enough.
We'll argue about that. Well, there's the Constitution, and you know it. And
I have a pretty strong feeling about how to read the Constitution. I tend to be more conservative. So, but I recognize that there's another view now that's been part of our constitutional law history for a long time. Whether it should be, it's different, but it is. It's just the reality that we've had a history of, looking beyond the 4 corners of the Constitution to find certain rights.
We're not going to have enough time to cover everything. We may have to come back. Right now, the right to abortion is not really before the court. The right to abortion within guidelines. There are some states that are saying
no abortion after 20 weeks.
Yeah, and there's some that are saying no abortion
or maybe 12 weeks.
Yeah, after the
I think Mississippi is 20 weeks, right?
Yeah.
But if you say no abortion after 20 weeks and it's pre-viability, it's going to be pushing back on the scope of Roe versus Wade.
It's been a while since I read Roe v. Wade or articles about it, but my understanding is that the ruling itself said that the states had a right at
post-viability,
yeah,
to ban abortion altogether.
Right.
Now they're going to try to ban it for some period of time between conception and viability. So, so 20 weeks, 12 weeks. After 3 months, you can't have an abortion. First trimester.
And of course, if this is chipped away at, it'll mean it goes back to the states. It won't mean that the Supreme Court, at least our guys, constitutionalists, aren't going to say we're making a final decision for the whole country. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. Not only will it go back to the states, it could go back to Congress. Congress could probably find a source of power to regulate the abortion procedure. So in a Congress now where you have the Senate controlled by the Democrats, the House were controlled by the Democrats, and the presidency, if they really wanted to, they could push an abortion bill through. I'd have to study exactly how they'd do it, but I think they could do it at the federal level. Certainly tied to the spending power, but they could do it.
The real fallback position for the ardently pro-life, there's conception, is a thing called personhood, which is in the Constitution, and can the courts or the legislature, federal legislature, grant personhood to conception?
Well,
or that,
I think that's been suggested, and the court has declined the invitation to decide, and they did that in Roe versus Wade, when life begins, when personhood begins. And they said, well, this is too philosophical and too deep. We can't answer that question. Now, in effect, they answered the question because they allowed abortion to take place pre-viability. So, but I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think that would in itself undermine Roe versus Wade, or would overrule Roe versus Wade, and they would take a different approach. They're going to take a different approach in Roe versus Wade if they determine that it's just illegitimate for the courts to find rights that are not even implicitly found in the text of the Constitution. So it's an originalist approach, where they're going to say,
hardline on originalists.
You know, they're going to be fairly, but I mean, it's really hard to say that there's a right to abort. It's just hard to say, no matter how you. I tend to be on the side of, if I was forced to vote for or against a law to criminalize abortion, I'd probably vote against it. But I'm very much on the side of court judges not having the power to create new constitutional rights. I think that's very problematic.
Just to clarify something, if I'm reading it right, the blocking of Eric Gardner to the Supreme Court.
Merrick Garland, who's our present AG. Yes.
That was he never had a hearing before the Senate. They just, the majority ruled that you don't do that in the last year. It wasn't that they went against the Constitution or anything. It was Senate rules on when you give consent. Is that right?
It's power. The Republicans controlled the Senate. They set the rules for the hearings, and they refused to set hearings on Merrick Garland. And so it's just the exercise of raw political power. When the Democrats began impeachment proceedings, twice. Once, after he'd lost the office, he was out of office. It's pure political power, and it's an exercise of it. Both sides do it. If you're partisan enough, you can argue that it was legitimate or not. But are they telling us that we're almost done?
I don't know what he's doing.